I was standing on my own land, tightening a loose fence board, when a complete stranger walked up, pointed at the grass under my boots, and said the most insane sentence I've ever heard in my life. "Half of this property belongs to the HOA now. I own this side." I actually laughed at first. I thought she was joking. But no, this woman, this perfectly pressed, sunglasses at 7 a.m., HOA, power-tripping Karen, wasn't smiling. She held a clipboard like it was a royal decree and told me that my 4-acre property land my grandfather bought with cash in 1973 was suddenly under HOA jurisdiction because she said so. And to make things worse, she demanded I pay for a full land survey to prove I wasn't trespassing on my own yard. That was the moment I knew something wasn't wrong. Something was very, very planned. Before we jump into this wild story, comment your location and local time below, and if you enjoy crazy HOA drama stories like this one, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. When Karen finally strutted off my property that morning, leaving behind a cloud of entitlement and cheap perfume, I remember standing there in the quiet, trying to process what had just happened. I'd dealt with difficult people before: neighbors, contractors, the occasional lost tourist who thought my pasture was a public hiking trail, but never in my 48 years had anyone told me I was trespassing on my own damn land. And the craziest part? Something about her tone, the way she kept glancing at the tree line, the smug way she held her papers. It didn't feel like a random misunderstanding. It felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced that speech in the mirror. This wasn't day one of a harmless HOA kerfuffle. This was step 3 of a plan that had already been set in motion. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something sitting at the pit of my stomach, an uneasy mix of anger and curiosity. Over the next few days, strange little things started happening. Nothing dramatic on their own, but weird enough to start stacking up. One morning I walked outside to find orange spray-painted dots on 2 of my trees. Perfect little circles, not markings any utility company would use. Someone else had placed a single blue flag right at the edge of my driveway again, not a color reserved for electric or gas lines. And every now and then, I'd spot a white SUV slowly creeping past my house. Not stopping, not speeding, just crawling, like someone was taking notes. On day 3, I was out near the barn repairing a latch when my neighbor, old man Rick, a guy who'd lived here longer than I'd been alive, walked over with his dog. He leaned on the fence and gave me that look people give when they're not sure how to break bad news. "You know who that woman was the other morning?" he asked. "Should I?" I replied. Rick snorted and spit into the grass. "That's Karen," he said, "the new HOA president over in Ridgewood Estates." I nodded slowly, pretending that meant something to me. But Rick wasn't done. "She's the kind who gets a little power and starts thinking she's Moses parting the Red Sea. Couple months ago she fined the Andersons $500 because their garden gnome was a tripping hazard. Last month she told the Clarks their siding wasn't an approved shade of beige." He paused. "And now? Word is she wants to expand the community walking path. Problem is, there's only one direction that makes sense, straight through your land." That explained a lot, but it didn't explain everything. "Rick," I said quietly, "is it normal for HOA folks to just march onto private land and claim it?" Rick laughed so hard he nearly swallowed his gum. "Normal? Hell no. But Karen ain't normal." Then he leaned closer. "Watch your back. She's the type who thinks rules don't apply to her. She'll push until someone pushes back. The thing is, I'm not a naturally suspicious man. I enjoy my space, my peace, my coffee in the morning with nothing but birds and wind as company. But once paranoia settles in, it's hard to shake." That night, around 10:30 p.m., I let my dog out and walked onto the back deck, and there across the creek, maybe 20 yards into the tree line, I saw lights. Not flashlights swaying casually, no Lisser levels, the kind surveyors use. They flickered red and green through the branches, moving in straight, measured lines. My blood snapped hot. Someone was on my land again. I hurried inside, grabbed my phone, and started recording from the deck. The figures were hard to make out, but I could clearly see 2 people hoodies, baseball caps pulled low, moving methodically, pacing back and forth as if drawing an invisible grid. Every so often one of them would bend down, plant a stake, or check a device. I zoomed in as much as I could. The footage was grainy, but it was proof of trespassing, proof of whatever this scheme was. I crept around the house, slipped out the side door, and approached quietly. I didn't want a confrontation in the dark, but I damn sure wanted a closer look. I made it about halfway to the creek when a twig snapped under my boot. Instantly, the lights clicked off. The forest went silent. Then I heard hurried footsteps running away through the brush. I was left alone with nothing but crickets and the faint smell of disturbed soil. When I got back inside, I transferred the footage to my computer and clipped out the best frames. Even in the poor light, you could see figures moving with purpose. Not teenagers messing around, not hikers lost in the wrong backyard. Professionals, or at least people pretending to be. The next morning, I drove down to the corner cafe and ordered a black coffee. I sat at the counter beside Linda, a cheerful woman in her 60s, who worked part-time at the county clerk's office. She asked why I looked like I hadn't slept, so I told her the short, version-strange markers on my property, a woman claiming half my land, surveyors in the dark. When I said surveyors, her eyebrows shot up. "You know we haven't issued any private survey permits in this area for the last few weeks, right?" she said. I nearly choked on my coffee. "You'd know that?" "Honey," she said, patting my hand, "I'm the one who signs them." My mind raced. If they weren't official surveyors, who the hell were they? And why were they acting like they had a right to be there? The puzzle pieces were starting to come together, but the picture wasn't clear yet. Not until later that afternoon. I was out by the mailbox when the same white SUV I'd seen creeping around pulled up. 3 people stepped out, 2 men in polos and khakis, and behind them, Karen. Wearing the same sunglasses, the same holier-than-thou expression, and holding a folder thicker than a Bible. "Good," she said without even saying hello. "You're here. We're moving this along." "Moving what along?" I asked. "The boundary reassessment," she said, flipping open her folder. "The HOA has reviewed your non-compliant property lines and determined that a resurvey is mandatory." I stared at her. "I told you. I'm not in your HOA." Karen smiled like she had a secret she couldn't wait to weaponize. "Oh, but you are. Ridgewood Estates voted on a retroactive annexation." I blinked. "You can't vote people into an HOA like it's jury duty." One of the men stepped forward. "We have authority to proceed," he said in a rehearsed tone. That was the moment a strange calm swept over me. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks, only this time, I wasn't the one about to get soaked. Because if they thought I was some clueless homeowner who'd just roll over because 3 matching clipboards told me to, they were about to learn who they were dealing with. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was attempted land grabbing. And now, I finally had enough evidence and enough motivation to start digging into why. Karen stood there like she owned the whole county, chin tilted up, sunglasses reflecting my front yard like she was surveying her new kingdom. The 2 men she brought with her shifted awkwardly, as if even they weren't fully convinced of the nonsense she was spouting. One of them tried to give me an official-sounding nod, the kind you see mall cops do when they want to feel respected. The whole scene would have been hilarious if it wasn't happening on my property. She clicked her tongue impatiently. "We don't have all day. I need your written acknowledgement that you're aware of the upcoming survey." I crossed my arms. "Let me make this easy. I'm not signing a damn thing." The look she gave me, God, you'd think I told her Starbucks just discontinued her favorite seasonal drink. Her entire face contorted into this perfect blend of outrage and disbelief, like I'd violated the sacred scripture of HOA authority. "You're obstructing a legal process," she snapped. "What process?" I asked. "You can't enforce something on land you don't control." Karen raised her folder like it was the 10 Commandments. "This says otherwise." She shoved a stack of papers at me. I took them, mostly because I wanted to see what kind of fiction she'd cooked up. The top page was a blurry, poorly scanned map that looked like someone took a photo of it with a 2003 Nokia phone. Boundaries were drawn in thick red marker freehand, not even straight. And according to this, half my pasture, the barn, and even a chunk of the creek behind my house were apparently part of Ridgewood Estates community property. I laughed, out loud. I couldn't help it. Karen's mouth tightened. "This is official documentation." "No," I said, tapping the folder. "This is a kindergartner's art project." The men behind she shifted uncomfortably, realizing this was not going the way Karen planned. One of them coughed and took a tiny step away from her, like HOA guilt was contagious. Karen snatched the papers back. "Fine, then we'll proceed without your cooperation." "You step foot on my land again without permission," I said calmly, "and we'll be having a very different kind of conversation." She scoffed. You wouldn't dare. You'd be surprised what I dare, I replied. She turned sharply to her two underlings. Let's go. We'll file non-compliance. The way she said non-compliance made it sound like a felony. She barked a few more orders, scribbling nonsense on her clipboard as she stomped back to her SUV. Before slamming the door, she pointed at me and snarled, "We'll be back tomorrow with surveyors." "You're going to regret this." Her SUV roared off down the gravel road, leaving a trail of dust and ego behind her. I stood there for a moment, letting the quiet settle. My dog trotted up beside me, ears perked. "Yeah," I muttered, patting his head. "Things are about to get interesting." Inside the house, I grabbed my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, replaying the past few days in my mind. Trespassers at night, strange markings, Karen showing up with a fake boundary map. And now she was threatening to bring an unauthorized survey crew onto my land. This was escalating, and fast. I needed to understand what she was after. I pulled out the old deed folder my grandfather kept in a fireproof box. It smelled like old paper and history receipts, county records, a hand-drawn boundary sketch that matched the land perfectly. I spread everything out and double-checked every line, every measurement. It was all airtight, my land was exactly where it had always been, but then something clicked, a memory. 3 months earlier, Ridgewood Estates had sent a letter to multiple homeowners nearby, talking about plans to expand pedestrian access to natural features. I had tossed mine in the trash back then because it didn't apply to me. But natural features? That meant the creek. My creek. I stepped outside again, walking to the edge of the water. The old footpath on the other side barely visible had once been used by kids in the 90 seconds. But I also knew the HOA had been trying for years to build a walking trail from their subdivision to the creek. They needed access, and the only convenient way was through my land. Now it made perfect sense. Karen wasn't confused. She wasn't mistaken. She wasn't misinformed. She was trying to annex my land through intimidation, and judging by her attitude, she probably expected I'd just roll over. I spent the next few hours installing more cameras around my property, motion sensors, wide-angle lenses, the whole works. If Karen wanted to play games, fine. But I wasn't going to let her play them in the dark. The sun was just dipping behind the trees when I heard a car engine again. I stepped onto the porch, expecting Karen's return. But this time it was my neighbor Hen Reith, retired surveyor. He parked his rusted pickup and waved. "Heard you've been having an eventful week," he said as he walked up the driveway. "Word travels fast," I replied. "In a small town?" He chuckled. "Faster than Wi-Fi." We sat on the porch steps, and I told him everything, starting with the mysterious nighttime surveyors. Henry's eyes narrowed. "Professional lights, you said? Laser levels?" "Yep," he scratched his chin. "Then they weren't random trespassers. That's real equipment. Expensive equipment." I nodded, feeling that knot in my stomach tighten. Henry asked to see the map Karen showed me. I grabbed it from inside and handed it over. He squinted at it, adjusting his glasses. "Lord have mercy, this is garbage." "Thought so." He tapped the corner of the map where a faint logo sat barely visible. "You know what this is?" "No." "It's a watermark," he said. "A digital tool amateur surveyors use. Real county maps don't have that. This one's patched together from an online template. So it's fake?" "Oh, it's worse than fake. It's stupid." I couldn't help laughing at that. Henry grew serious. "But it tells me something. She didn't get this from a real surveyor. She got it from someone willing to fabricate." That hit exactly where my suspicion had been growing. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "She's pushing hard for this land." "She wants something," Henry agreed. "Something big enough she's willing to take risks." He stood. "Tell you what, bring your deed over tomorrow. I'll help you compare everything. If she's forging documents, we'll prove it." Henry left shortly after, and I walked back inside with a new kind of resolve burning in my chest. If Karen wanted a war, I wasn't afraid of fighting one. The next morning arrived with a thin layer of fog over the creek, giving the whole yard a pale silver glow. Peaceful, quiet, until it wasn't. At exactly 9:05 a.m., the rumble of tires broke the stillness. A large white pickup pulled up, followed by a second SUV. 4 men in reflective vests stepped out, carrying tripods and surveying equipment, real equipment this time. And behind them, Karen, wearing a pink blazer so bright it could signal airplanes. She strutted toward me like she'd been waiting all night for this moment. "Step aside," she barked. "We're conducting the survey, No, you're not, I said, blocking the gate. Karen gave a triumphant smirk. You don't have a choice. This is happening. I glanced at her surveyors. None of them would meet my eyes. That told me everything. They knew this was shady. Illegal. Wrong. I raised my phone. I need all of you to hear this clearly, I said loud enough for my camera mic to pick up. This is private property. You do not have permission to enter. If you step across this line, you are trespassing. Karen's confidence cracked for half a second. Then she snapped, record all you want, it won't save you. But she was wrong. Because multiple angles of footage, timestamps, and 4 unauthorized surveyors stepping onto my land, that wasn't saving me. That was burying her. The moment Karen's survey crew took that first step toward my property line, my instincts snapped like a tripwire. I lifted my phone higher, keeping the camera trained on them, recording every inch of their movements. This is your last warning, I said calmly. Turn around and leave. But Karen, being Karen, planted herself right in front of them like some kind of deranged marching band conductor. Keep moving, she ordered without even glancing back. This man doesn't own what he thinks he owns. The HOA has jurisdiction. Oh, she loved that word jurisdiction. She said it like it made her 6 feet taller. One of the surveyors hesitated and leaned toward her. Ma'am, we really need explicit permission from the property owner. Karen spun on him. You have permission. I just gave it. To his credit, the guy blinked at her like she had grown a second head. But I'm pretty sure that's not how permission works. Karen let out a frustrated hiss and swiped his clipboard from him. Fine. I'll sign it myself. She scribbled something so aggressively the pen squeaked. Then she smacked the clipboard back into his chest. There. Happy? I swear I could not make this stuff up if I tried. The man reluctantly turned back toward my land, taking one more tentative step forward. And that was it. That was the exact moment everything changed. Because the second his boot touched my grass, barely even bending a blade of me, neighbor Henry's voice cut through the air like a crack of thunder. That's enough. Everyone stopped. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Henry marched down the road toward us, wearing his old surveyor's vest and carrying a thick binder that looked like it held the secrets of the universe. Nobody moves another inch, he said firmly. Karen rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might injure herself. What now? Henry pointed at the surveyor's equipment. You boys licensed in this county? The men exchanged awkward glances. One of them muttered, We do contract work for the HOA sometimes. That's not what I asked, Henry snapped. Karen stepped forward as if shielding them. They don't need licensing for boundary reassessments. Henry almost laughed. They sure as hell do when they're entering privately held land with no authorization. The surveyors suddenly looked very interested in the ground. Karen tried to steamroll on. They can perform preliminary measurements. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure, my wrinkled left shoe, Henry said. He pointed at the binder in his hands. I've worked 40 years in this county. I know every boundary line, every easement, every zoning oddity from here to the highway, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, he turned to me. Son, your land is 100% intact. Not a single inch belongs to Ridgewood Estates. Karen crossed her arms so tightly I heard the fabric strain. Well, she scoffed, that's your opinion. Henry raised the binder like a holy scripture. No, ma'am, this is the county's opinion. He flipped it open and revealed official stamped document-sold plat maps, deed references, survey certificates, and color-coded boundaries. He laid them across the hood of my truck. The surveyors drifted over, curious despite Karen's glare. Henry traced a line with his finger. This is your boundary, he told me. Hasn't changed since 1973. Then he shifted his finger to the highlighted path behind Ridgewood. And this is the ridge access the HOA wants. But they can't have it. Not without buying it from you fair and square. Karen's face darkened like a storm cloud. What does any of that prove? That map is outdated. It's the county-certified plat on record, Henry shot back. Show me yours. Karen froze. It was only a half-second pause, but it was enough. She didn't have a real map. She only had that flimsy printout she'd waved in my face earlier, the one that looked like it came from a copy machine in a gas station. She reached into her folder anyway, pulled out the sheet, and slapped it onto the truck hood like she was slapping down a winning poker hand. This, she said triumphantly, is the updated version. Henry leaned over it, stared for a good 5 seconds, then straightened up slowly. He didn't yell, he didn't laugh, he just looked at the surveyors, then at me, and finally at Karen. "Who made this?" he asked. Karen sniffed. "Our contracted mapper. What's their name?" "That's confidential." Henry raised his eyebrows. "If it was licensed work, it wouldn't be confidential." Karen's veneer of confidence flickered. "You don't need to know the mapper's name." "I don't," Henry said. "But the sheriff might. That did it." The surveyors immediately started packing up their gear. Karen whirled on them. "Where are you going? We haven't taken any measurements." One of them cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if this is a legal dispute over private land, we really can't be part of it without county authorization." Karen looked like she was ready to breathe fire. "I will report you all for abandoning a job site." The surveyor shrugged. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is not a job. This is trespassing." They loaded the last tripod and climbed into their truck. Karen tried to block the door, but the driver gently nudged her aside and closed it. Within seconds, they drove off, leaving her alone, humiliated and shaking with rage. She turned back to me and Henry with eyes full of venom. "This isn't over," she hissed. Henry smirked. "Darlin', it was over before it started." Karen stomped to her SUV, muttering curses about ungrateful landowners and disrespectful peasants. When she peeled out onto the road, she nearly took out my mailbox again. I watched her go until she vanished down the hill. Henry sighed. "She's up to something bigger," he said quietly. "This wasn't just about a walking path." "I know," I said. "She's been watching my place for days." Henry nodded. "Then you need to figure out what she's after, and fast." I walked Henry to his truck and thanked him for stepping in. He waved me off. "Your granddad was a good man." I'm not letting some clipboard tyrant rewrite history on his land. After he drove off, I stood in my yard for a long moment, listening to the breeze move through the trees. The peaceful sounds of nature didn't match the tension in my chest. Karen wasn't done, not by a long shot, and something told me she was capable of far more than shoving fake maps in people's faces. She wanted that land, my land, and the way she acted today proved she had a plan. A flawed one, but a plan nonetheless. As I headed back inside, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We're not done. Expect an official HOA notice tomorrow, Karen." I stared at the screen. Official? From who? Not the county, not the sheriff. From herself. I chuckled bitterly. She really thinks she's the government. But what I didn't know yet, what I was about to discover, was that Karen wasn't just bluffing. She was forging. And tomorrow's notice would be the beginning of the real fight. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my dog barking like the mailman had shown up riding a grizzly bear. I pulled on my boots, walked to the front door, and before I even stepped outside, I saw it something bright red taped to my gate. A notice. A very large, very aggressive, unnecessarily dramatic notice. The paper was neon red, like Karen had picked the most obnoxious color possible just to make sure it could be seen from outer space. Thick block letters screamed across the top. Immediate HOA violation, non-compliant property boundaries. I swear I could almost hear dramatic courtroom music playing in the background. I tore it off the gate and read through it. It was a masterpiece of delusion. According to the notice, I owed the HOA $5,000. Not for breaking rules, not for damaging community property. No, me crime was interfering with authorized HOA surveying procedures and refusing mandatory compliance. Mandatory compliance. On land I didn't belong to their HOA, right. At the bottom was a signature that looked like it had been created with a shaky hand and an extra fine Sharpie, Karen B. Halbrook OA President. And below that, in parentheses, she'd written, "Certified by HOA Legal Department." There was no name, no stamp, no address, just the word department scribbled like a child writing on a homework excuse. My dog barked again, and when I looked up, I saw her, Karen, standing across the road with her arms folded and her sunglasses gleaming like two solar panels of judgment. Beside her stood a tall man in a blazer holding a briefcase. He looked like a lawyer, but his tie was crooked, and he seemed uncomfortable, like Karen had dragged him here against his will. She yelled across the street, "I see you got the notice. Payment is due in 72 hours. I held the paper up. "This?" I asked. "This isn't worth the ink you wasted printing it." Karen gasped as if I'd insulted her entire bloodline. "This is legally binding." "No," I said, "this is sad. The man beside her cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "you have been issued a formal warning under HOA." I interrupted him. "Let me ask you something. Are you a real lawyer?" He blinked. Twice. Excuse me? You heard me," I said. "Did you pass the bar, or did Karen just bribe you with a coupon for lawn service?" He turned red, then pale, then red again. "I'm helping with administrative—" "So you're not a lawyer," I concluded. He swallowed and looked at the ground. "Not officially." I pointed at Karen. "So your legal department is one guy with a briefcase from Walmart and a fake title?" Karen shrieked. "He is a consultant." "Yeah," I said, "and I'm the Queen of England." She stomped toward me until she was right at the edge of my fence line. "Listen here," she growled. "Your property has been annexed. The HOA board voted on it unanimously. That means half of your acreage is now community land." I stared at her. "You can't annex private property by vote, Karen. That's not how America works." She jabbed a finger at me. "You think you're above the HOA? I think the HOA has nothing to do with me," I corrected. She inhaled sharply. "You're going to regret mocking our authority." I tilted my head. "You keep using that word. Authority. But last time I checked, the HOA's authority ends at the subdivision entrance." Karen clenched her jaw so hard I could practically hear her teeth grinding. Then she thrust out another paper toward me. "These are the updated property lines. We held a meeting. Residents agreed. Majority vote. I didn't take the paper. Karen, you can't steal land by holding a potluck vote." From behind her, the consultant attempted to speak again. "Well, technically," Karen snapped her fingers at him. "Shut up, Daniel." He immediately closed his mouth. This was getting ridiculous. I turned and walked back toward my porch, ignoring Karen's continued shouting behind me. "You are in non-compliance. This is a violation. You can't ignore me." But I could, and I did. Inside, I sat down at my table and called Henry. "Morning," he answered. "She taped a violation notice to my gate," I said. $5,000. Henry laughed so hard I heard him wheeze. "Ah, hell, son, Karen's gone full emperor mode." "That's not all," I said. "She brought a fake lawyer." "Of course she did," Henry groaned. "She's running out of real people willing to help her." I told him everything and he sighed. "All right, we need to get ahead of this. Bring your deed and all property documents to my place this afternoon. There's something I want to show you." I spent the next few hours gathering every scrap of information. I handled maps, receipts, tax records, and my grandfather's handwritten notes from decades ago. Those notes were like gold. He documented everything, even why he bought certain parcels. At 3 p.m., I arrived at Henry's house. He led me into his workshop, a place filled with old surveying tools, yellowing maps, and binders labeled in neat handwriting. He pulled out one huge binder and laid it on the table. "This," he said, opening it, "is the original zoning and development plan for Ridgewood Estates before it was an HOA, before it even existed." He flipped through pages until he reached a highlighted section. "Look here." I leaned over. My eyebrows shot up. According to the county records from decades ago, the land the HOA now occupied had once been part of a parcel offered to my grandfather. But he only bought the southern portion of it, leaving a narrow strip untouched, a strip that ran directly along the back of their subdivision. And then Henry said the sentence that changed everything. "Son, your grandfather didn't just buy land, he bought the access rights behind the ridge. That narrow strip of land? It still belongs to your family. It may be small, but legally, it gives you control over the back entrance into Ridgewood Estates." I blinked. Once, twice. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that I own the entire back path the HOA needs for access?" Henry nodded. "Yep, and Karen has no idea." My heart started pounding, not from fear, but from opportunity. "So let me get this straight," I said. "Karen is trying to steal half my property, without realizing I already own a piece of hers?" "Exactly," Henry said with a grin. "Which means you, my friend, hold all the cards." I sat down hard, letting the full weight of that sink in. While Karen was busy forging maps, bullying neighbors, and hosting fake annexation meetings, she never once checked the oldest county record of them all. The one that proved her precious neighborhood sat beside a strip of land owned by me. If she wanted access to the ridge, she needed my permission, which she would never get. But I wasn't ready to reveal that card yet. Not until I saw just how far she was willing to push this insanity. For now, I had one job: gather every piece of evidence, because Karen's game wasn't over, and the next move was hers. When I drove home from Henry's place that evening, the sky was already turning orange, the kind of color that normally makes a man feel grateful just to be alive. But gratitude wasn't the emotion in my chest. No, what I felt was something far sharper: anticipation. Because now I finally understood the game Karen was playing, and more importantly, I understood the piece of the board she didn't even know existed. She thought she was closing in on my land. She didn't realize she'd placed her entire HOA right on mine, but I kept quiet. Quiet is good when you're watching someone dig their own grave. I parked the truck, stepped onto my porch, and immediately noticed something off. My front gate, normally closed, was hanging open. My dog was growling from the living room window. That wasn't normal for him. He barked at mailmen, sure, but not like this. This was the low, warning kind of growl. I walked down the steps, scanning the yard. Nothing was missing, nothing was broken, but something had been moved. The boundary marker near my driveway, an old metal stake sunk into the ground decades ago, was bent. Not broken, just bent. As if someone had tried to yank it out but didn't quite manage. I knelt beside it, running a hand along the bend. It was fresh. Dirt was disturbed around the base. Someone had tried to remove my boundary line. Not survey it, not measure it, remove it. My heart thudded once. Hard. I straightened up slowly. Someone had been here. Someone who wasn't afraid to cross the fence when I wasn't home. I pulled out my phone and checked the camera footage from earlier. Nothing. No movement detection. Nothing but cars driving past. That meant one thing. Whoever did this knew where the cameras weren't. That narrowed the list down to exactly one person: Karen. And if she was bold enough to start tampering with legal boundary markers, she was moving into criminal territory. I went inside, fed the dog, and spent the evening organizing documents. I printed county records, scanned my grandfather's notes, sorted Henry's copies of old plats, and stored everything in a labeled binder. If this was going where I suspected, I needed everything neat, accessible, and ready for legal hands. Around 9 p.m., just as I was finishing, I heard a buzzing sound outside, a drone. I walked to the upstairs window and saw it, small, black, hovering over the tree line near my barn. Its lights blinked red, blue, like it thought it was an emergency vehicle. It drifted slowly across my yard, dipping low toward the creek, then rising again, as if mapping something. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in. There was a tiny sticker on its side. Ridgewood Estates, Security Unit. I nearly burst out laughing. Karen had weaponized a toy and called it security. I grabbed my spotlight, stepped outside, and shined the beam directly onto the drone. The moment the light hit it, the drone panicked. A machine could panic, jerking upward and flying back toward the subdivision at full speed. But the important part wasn't the surveillance. It was the fact that Karen was escalating. First fake maps, then fake surveyors, then fake legal notices, now drones, and that meant one thing. She was desperate. The next morning, I woke up to pounding on my door. Not knocking, pounding. My dog barked so loud the windows rattled. I opened the door to find 2 HOA board members standing on the porch, looking as though they'd been forced at gunpoint to be there. Between them stood Karen, wearing a bright orange blazer so loud it could have triggered car alarms. "Good morning," she said in a tone that could curdle milk. "We're here for the compliance inspection." I blinked at her. "The what? The compliance inspection?" she repeated, as if explaining to a toddler. "Since you refused the survey and rejected the violation notice, we are required to inspect your property ourselves." I stared at her. "Karen, you do realize trespassing is illegal, right?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Trespassing doesn't apply to the HOA. That's literally exactly who it applies to." Karen tried to step forward, but I blocked the doorway. "Nobody is entering my home," I said. "This isn't your home anymore," she hissed. "Half of it is community jurisdiction." One of the board members, a short woman with glasses, tugged nervously at her sleeve. "Karen, maybe we shouldn't." Karen snapped. "Silence, Patricia." Patricia immediately took a step back, hands clasped like she'd been scolded by a nun. I pointed down the steps. "This inspection isn't happening. Get off my property." Karen's face contorted. "You don't understand what I can do to you," she said, her voice low and venomous. "If you keep resisting, I will escalate this. I crossed my arms. Karen, what you've been doing is the escalation. She glared at me for a long moment, then pulled a folded paper from her bag and shoved it at me. Fine, she said. Then consider this your final warning. I opened the paper. It was a second violation notice. This time the fine was $10,000 for refusing mandatory HOA cooperation and tampering with community boundary markers. The irony was so thick you could pave a driveway with it. You're accusing me of tampering with the boundary marker? I asked. Yes, she said quickly. The board witnessed it. I looked at the two board members. They stared at the ground, visibly uncomfortable. You witnessed me tampering with it? I asked them. Neither spoke. Karen answered for them. They don't have to say anything. I speak on behalf of the board. I shook my head. No, you don't. You speak for yourself. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. And I know exactly what you were doing last night. For the first time, Karen's composure cracked. Her eyes twitched. Her jaw clenched. You're unhinged, she snapped. You're paranoid. I smiled. You're sloppy. She made a strangled sound and spun around. We're leaving, she barked at the board members. This man is aggressive. Patricia opened her mouth as if to say something but stopped when Karen shot her a look. The three of them marched down the driveway, but before Karen reached the road, she turned. You won't win, she said. You're just one man. I have an entire HOA. I leaned on the porch railing, and I have the county. That hit her, hard. Her face blanched. She quickly got into her SUV and sped away. The moment her car disappeared, my phone buzzed. It was Henry. Got something for you, he texted, and you're going to want to see it in person. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to his house. He was waiting on the porch, waving a stack of papers. When I reached him, he grinned. You remember that narrow strip of land your grandfather bought? Turns out it wasn't just trail access. He handed me the papers. I skimmed them. My stomach dropped. My grandfather hadn't just bought access. He bought a protective easement that extended behind the entire ridgeland that HOA Ridgewood had built fences, walking paths, and even 2 utility sheds on. They were all sitting on my property, every single one. I stared at Henry. Are you saying? I'm saying, he interrupted with a smile, that Karen didn't just try to steal your land. He tapped the paper. She's already built things on yours. And suddenly, everything made sense. Karen wasn't trying to annex my land to expand a walking trail. She was trying to annex it to cover up the fact that the HOA was already in violation of county law on land they had no legal right to be on, and once this got out, her entire HOA presidency would collapse. Maybe even her freedom. And now I knew the one thing she didn't want anyone to find out. The war had officially shifted. Because now I had the upper hand. I drove home from Henry's place that afternoon with my mind racing so fast I barely noticed the road. My grandfather, the quiet gentleman who spent more time fishing than talking, had outplayed an HOA decades before the HOA even existed. He'd purchased not just a thin strip of land, but a protective easement that ran behind the entire Ridgewood subdivision, an easement that the HOA, in all its arrogance, had built directly onto. Not just a walking path, not just a fence, but 2 utility shed structures that required permits they never had, placed on land they didn't own. If Karen wanted a war, she just handed me nuclear-level ammunition. When I reached my driveway, I pulled in and saw something unexpected. A group of neighbors gathered near my property line. Not strangers, actual Ridgewood residents. Some I vaguely recognized from passing waves on the road. Others I'd never seen before. Their faces were tense, worried. A few held printed papers, HOA papers. And standing awkwardly to the side, wringing her hands, was Patricia The board member Karen had snapped at earlier. My stomach tightened. This wasn't normal HOA activity. This was mutiny. I stepped out of my truck. A middle-aged man with a baseball cap approached me first. Are you the gentleman Karen's been fighting with? I chuckled. I guess that's me. He sighed heavily. Buddy, we need to talk. He introduced himself as Frank, a Ridgewood resident for nearly 20 years. A couple others stepped forward. Mia, Derek, and an older man named Thomas who walked with a cane. They all looked tired, embarrassed, defeated. Frank rubbed his temples. Look, we're not here to cause trouble. We're here because, well, we think Karen's lost her mind. I raised an eyebrow. You think? Mia, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, stepped closer. We didn't vote for any annexation, and we never approved a trail expansion. But Karen told us you were blocking community access and refusing lawful procedures. Derek nodded. She said you were the reason property values were dropping. I blinked. Dropping? Because of me? Thomas scoffed. Son, this whole place is worth less because Karen fines people for leaving their porch lights on past 10 p.m. Don't let her blame her nonsense on you. Patricia finally approached, nervously adjusting her glasses. I have something you should see. She handed me a folder. Inside were internal HOA emails. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Many of them printed with highlighted sections. I skimmed through them and my jaw clenched tighter with each page. These weren't just normal HOA communications. These were instructions, Karen's instructions. She had told the board to vote on measures without reading them, approve fines without evidence, deny homeowners access to meeting minutes, reclassify community boundaries to prepare for annexation, and worst of all, she'd declared certain properties, including mine, uncooperative assets requiring seizure. She had actually used that word. I exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to laugh out loud. This woman genuinely believed she ran a small dictatorship. You're giving me these? I asked. Patricia nodded shamefully. I'm done helping her. I'm done being scared of her. You're the only person who seems willing to stand up to her. Frank stepped closer. We'll back you if you push back. We just want our neighborhood back. For a moment, I just stood there, absorbing the weight of their trust. They weren't here to fight me, they were begging me for help. I appreciate this, I said, but I need you all to be prepared. When Karen realizes you're talking to me— Oh, she already knows, Thomas interrupted. I frowned. How? He pointed a thumb behind him. That's when I saw her, Karen, standing at the end of the street, frozen, staring at us. Fists clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. The second our eyes met, she snapped. She stormed toward us like a tornado in a pantsuit, shrieking at the top of her lungs. What do you think you're doing? She screamed, voice cracking with fury. Everyone backed away except Patricia, who stepped behind me like she expected Karen to physically attack her. You traitors! Karen screeched. All of you. You're conspiring against the HOA. This is illegal. Frank rolled his eyes. Karen, we're having a conversation. That's not illegal. It is when you undermine the board, she spat. And you, she turned on me. You're trespassing on our attention and poisoning our community. I blinked. Trespassing on your attention? She jabbed a finger at my chest. I'm going to report all of you, every single one. To who? I asked calmly. To the authorities. Which ones? The OO authorities. Silence fell. Then Frank muttered, Karen, that's not a thing. Karen shook with rage and pointed at Patricia. You? You think handing him documents is going to save you? You're done. You're off the board. Patricia inhaled shakily. You can't remove board members without a vote. Oh yes I can, Karen snapped. I am the vote. That sentence hung in the air like a bad smell. I stepped forward, arms crossed. Karen, stop. You're spiraling. Her head whipped around. Spiraling? Spiraling? You haven't even seen what I'm capable of. She dug into her purse and pulled out yet another notice, this time printed on glossy cardstock like she'd gone to a print shop specifically to intimidate me. Final eviction warning, it declared in dramatic font. I stared at it. Eviction. From my home. Yes, she said proudly. You are hereby ordered to vacate within 7 days. And who issued this? I did. And what authority did you use? The HOA Constitution, which is, she blinked, the HOA Handbook. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Karen, a handbook is not a constitution. It is when I say it is, she screamed. The neighbors flinched. Even my dog barked at her from inside the house. I suddenly realized the fight was no longer between me and Karen. It was me and the truth. Versus Karen and whatever fantasy world she'd built inside her head. The neighbors slowly scattered, apologizing to me as they left. Patricia lingered a moment longer and whispered, Be careful, she's getting worse. I nodded. I know. Karen stood in the middle of the road, breathing hard, glaring at me like she wanted to melt me with her eyes. Then she turned on her heel, stomped back toward her SUV, and roared off, tires squealing dramatically even though no one was in her way. The moment she was gone, I let out a long breath. But I didn't have long to reflect. Because as soon as I walked inside, my phone buzzed with a new email from holagaldept@ridgewoodmail.com. Subject: Mandatory court summons. I opened it. It was another fake legal notice. But this one crossed a new line. It threatened criminal charges. It threatened property seizure. It threatened lien placements. It even listed a fake court date. I sat down, rubbed my temples, stared at the screen. Karen wasn't slowing down, she wasn't folding, she was escalating. And now she'd committed a felony, issuing fraudulent legal summons. But I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet, because Karen was about to hang herself, and I wanted the whole noose on camera. I gathered the fake emails, the bogus notices, the photos of boundary marker tampering, footage of the drone, recordings of the illegal survey attempt, and Patricia's leaked documents. Then I opened my binder of county records. My deed, the easement, the fact that the HOA had built structures on my land. Everything was lining up for a perfect takedown. Tomorrow, I decided, would be the day I pulled the pin, because Karen had no idea what was coming, and the next move was mine. The next morning felt different, not just because I'd barely slept, but because something in the air had changed like the calm before a storm breaks loose and takes half the county with it. I woke early, fed the dog, grabbed my coffee, and sat on the porch with my binder of evidence beside me. Today wasn't about waiting for Karen to make her next move. Today was about walking straight into the lion's den and watching the lion panic. My plan was simple: visit the county office, verify every document one more time, and then file an official complaint backed by evidence so airtight Karen couldn't scream her way out of it. But as I prepared to leave, I noticed something bizarre. A large wooden sign had been planted in my front yard overnight. Not just any Signon official-looking one, painted white with blue lettering. Notice: this property is under Ho Review entry restricted to approved personal. Underneath, in smaller text, trespassers will be fined. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds before it fully registered. Karen had placed a fake government-style sign on my land, telling me not to enter my own property. My dog sniffed it, looked at me, and sneezed like he too found it absolutely ridiculous. I took a picture of the sign for evidence, pulled it out of the ground, snapped it across my knee, and tossed it into the back of my truck. If she wanted props, I'd bring them to the county office myself. On my way out, I passed Ridgewood Estates. The moment I reached their entrance, I saw another sign, this one newly installed near their brick entryway. Community Expansion Project Phase 1. Below it was a poorly drawn map showing a new trail drawn right through my land. They were already planning the expansion. They weren't even hiding it anymore. But what made me stop the truck wasn't the sign. It was the sight of Karen standing on the cul-de-sac, waving around a clipboard while several confused residents listened. She was lecturing them loudly, pointing wildly in my direction. I couldn't hear her from inside the truck, but judging by her face, she wasn't telling them I was a charming neighbor with excellent taste in fences. I parked just far enough not to provoke her. A couple of residents glanced my way nervously, but I ignored them. I didn't have time for confrontation. Not yet. As I drove to the county office, I replayed in my mind everything Henry had shown me: the easement, the boundary lines, the fact that parts of Ridgewood were sitting illegally on my land. The more I thought about it, the more confident I felt. Karen believed she had leverage. She believed she had power. But what she really had? Paper fakes and fantasies. And I had proof. At the recorder's office, I was greeted by Linda, same woman from the cafe. She recognized me, waved me over, and offered that sympathetic smile small-town clerks seem born with. "Rough week?" she asked gently. "Rough enough," I said, "but I need some verification." I laid out everything: my deed, the old plat maps, the easement documents, the photos of Ridgewood's sheds sitting on my land. Linda went through them one by one, nodding slowly as she scanned each page. After several minutes, she said, "Everything here checks out. Your land boundaries haven't shifted since 1981. No annexations, no adjustments, no HOA filings involving your parcel." I exhaled. "So Karen's maps are absolute garbage," Linda finished. She stamped a fresh copy of the county map, slid it across the counter, and lowered her voice. "You want to report her, don't you?" "I want to stop her before she does something worse." Linda nodded sympathetically. "I'll get the county investigator. Within minutes, a man named Officer Grantall, broad-shouldered, with a calm, stern demeanor entered the office. He introduced himself, sat across from me, and listened carefully while I explained the situation. Fake maps, fake notices, fake surveys, tampering with boundary markers, drone surveillance, attempted entry onto private land, illegal structures built on my property, a fraudulent legal summons. By the time I finished, his expression was serious. "This isn't an HOA dispute," he said. "This is attempted land fraud." I nodded. "So what do we do?" Grant tapped the table. "We investigate. We interview. And if everything you've shown is correct," he paused, "we file charges." Just then, Linda rushed back from the printer. "You need to see this," she said, handing us a document. "Someone filed a request this morning to change the zoning lines around your property." My eyebrows shot up. "Someone?" Linda nodded grimly. "Karen Halbrook. She had tried to get the county to change the map before the HOA vote, before the fake notices, before the nighttime survey. This wasn't just her reacting to me refusing a survey. She had planned everything." Grant let out a low whistle. "She's bold," he murmured, "but sloppy." He stood up. "We're going to Ridgewood." I blinked. "Right now?" "Right now." 20 minutes later, we pulled into Ridgewood Estates. Residents had gathered outside, murmuring nervously, staring toward the clubhouse. A line of cars was parked alongside the curb. And at the center of all of it, Karen. She was standing on a folding table, editorially standing on eight arms, raised as if addressing a nation. Her voice carried across the street. "Do not be intimidated," she shouted. "He is lying." "That man," she pointed wildly toward the street, "is trying to steal OUR community land." A resident raised a timid hand. "But, didn't you say he wasn't part of the HOA?" Karen's face contorted. "He's a threat to the Ho," another woman asked. "But why are we expanding into his land? Don't we already have a walking trail?" Karen stomped her foot. "Because it's not his land," she screamed. "It belongs to the community." Grant stepped forward then, flashing his badge. "Miss Halbrook," he called out calmly, "we need to speak with you." Karen froze mid-rant. She slowly turned her head, eyes widening as she recognized the badge. "Oh, officer," she said sweetly, climbing down from the table. "Thank goodness you're here. That man has been harassing our community." Grant didn't blink. "Ma'am, we have received multiple complaints." "That's right," she said loudly. "From me." "About fraudulent documents," Grant continued without raising his voice. Karen's smile faltered. "Two, don't know what you mean. Fake legal notices, unauthorized survey attempts, drone surveillance, attempts to seize land that does not belong to the HOA." Karen flinched. The neighbors whispered. Grant continued, "We have also confirmed that the HOA has built structures on protected land owned by Mr. Lies." Karen screamed before he could finish. "Lies, all of it." Grant held up a hand. "Ma'am, if you interrupt me again, I will consider it obstruction." Karen's mouth snapped shut. Grant turned to the crowd. "We will be conducting a full investigation. I need to speak with the HOA board." Several residents looked thrilled, others terrified. Patricia, the timid board member, raised her hand weakly. We didn't know," she said. "Karen didn't tell us anything." Karen spun toward her. "Silence!" Grant stepped between them. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "you are to remain where I can see you." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, her face turning the color of boiled beets. As Grant led the board members inside for interviews, Karen stayed outside, trembling with rage. She caught my eye and whispered viciously, "You think you've won? You haven't. I always win." I stepped closer, leaned in just enough for only her to hear, and whispered back, "Karen, you don't even realize how screwed you are." Her eyes flickered fear, confusion, rage, all at once. Because she didn't know the easement truth yet. She didn't know the biggest bombshell was still coming, and once Grant discovered it, it would be the final nail in the coffin of her self-proclaimed HOA kingdom. For the next hour, I stayed outside Ridgewood Estates, while Officer Grant interviewed each of the board members inside the community clubhouse. Residents hovered around me in clusters, whispering nervously, waiting for something explosive to happen. They weren't sure if they wanted justice, entertainment, or both, but they were sure something big was coming. I leaned against my truck, arms crossed, watching their faces as the minutes ticked by. Patricia paced back and forth, chewing her lip. Frank stood with his arms folded, glaring toward the clubhouse like he was mentally preparing to vote Karen out of office himself. Mia stood beside me with her arms hugged tight around her chest. "Never thought it'd come to this," she murmured. "Neither did I said. "I figured she'd yell a lot, hand out fines, maybe threaten a lawn gnome or two. But fraud? Trespassing? Fake legal notices?" Mia sighed. "She changed after she was elected. It was like the moment she got a title, she became someone else." "No," Frank muttered. "She became more of who she really is." Before anyone could respond, the clubhouse doors swung open. Officer Grant stepped out, his face carved from stone. Behind him, 3 board members slowly followed: Patricia, Derek, and another man I didn't know. All 3 looked pale and shaken, but Karen was nowhere to be seen. Grant approached me first. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "I'll need you to come inside. The board has provided statements, and I'd like you to verify some details." I nodded and followed him through the clubhouse doors. The moment I stepped inside, I understood why Karen hadn't come out. She was sitting at the head of a long conference table, arms crossed, sunglasses still on even though we were indoors. Her leg was bouncing furiously, and beside her sat a stack of papers, binders, and a large cup of iced coffee, the throne of a tyrant who refuses to admit defeat. Her smile when she saw me walk in was venomous. "Officer," she said loudly, "I demand this man be arrested for harassment, intimidation, and interfering with HOA operations." Grant ignored her. "Sit," he instructed me. I sat at the opposite end of the table. Karen audibly scoffed, like she couldn't believe I was allowed to sit in the same room as her. Grant placed a folder in front of me. "We've confirmed several violations," he said. "However, I need clarification on the easement rights your neighbor Henry mentioned." I opened the folder and carefully removed the copies of my deed, the 1981 county acquisition, and the protected easement documentation. I slid them across the table. Karen's eyes widened ever so slightly. Grant read each document, flipping pages slowly, nodding occasionally. After several minutes, he looked directly at Karen. "Miss Halbrook," he said, "these records indicate that your HOA has built multiple structures, specifically 2 utility sheds and a fence on easement land that does not belong to Ridgewood Estates." Karen let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Those records are ancient, irrelevant, outdated. We've expanded since then." "Expansion," Grant said calmly, "does not override legal easements." Karen's knee bounced even faster. No, that can't be right. Our developer told us that land was unused." Grant raised an eyebrow. "Unused does not mean unowned." She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and scoffed loudly. "This is absurd. You're all reading it wrong. That land belongs to the HOA. Everyone knows that." "Actually," Patricia said quietly from her seat behind Grant, "we didn't know that. You never told us anything about the sheds being on someone else's property." Karen whipped her head around. "You knew enough," she shouted. "You all signed off." "No," Patricia said softly but firmly. "We signed off on what you told us. You forced votes without sharing documents." Karen slammed her palm onto the table. "I am the president. And the president isn't above the law," Grant said sharply. The room went dead silent. Karen stared at him, her jaw trembling. "What are you implying?" Grant straightened his uniform. "I am implying that if you knowingly built structures on someone else's land, filed fraudulent annexation requests, or submitted false legal notices, you may be facing charges," Karen sputtered. "Charges? For what? Protecting our community? For fraud, trespassing, coercion, issuing false legal documents, and attempted property seizure?" Grant replied without blinking. To start, color drained from Karen's face. She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. Grant continued, "Before I proceed further, I need to confirm one last detail with Mr. Thompson." I nodded. "Go ahead." Grant lifted the easement document. "This protective easement gives you authority to restrict access to the ridge behind Ridgewood. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And the HOA has constructed multiple structures on that easement without permission?" "Yes." Karen slammed both hands onto the table and stood up so fast her chair screeched. "This is ridiculous. You're taking his word over mine, over the president of Ridgewood Estates?" Grant didn't flinch. "Yes." Karen's mouth fell open. "It's all in the records," he added. "The county documentation predates your HOA establishment by over 30 years. Karen's voice cracked. 2, don't accept this, I refuse. This investigation is biased. You're all conspiring against me. No one is conspiring against you, Grant said. You did this to yourself. Her breathing picked up fast, shallow, frantic. She dragged her hand through her hair, smearing her lipstick with the back of her wrist. I built this community, she whispered. I protected it. I made it what it is. And now you've endangered it, Grant replied. I could almost see something snap inside her. Her eyes darted wildly from me to the board members to Grant. Then she lunged. She grabbed the easement document off the table, crumpled it in her fist, and screamed, "This is not real!" Grant immediately grabbed her wrist. "That's enough, ma'am." But Karen was beyond reasoning. She swatted his hand away, stumbling backward. "No! I refuse to let you take this from me. I refuse to let you," she pointed at me, "destroy my authority." "You destroyed it yourself," I said quietly. She let out a guttural scream and threw the crumpled document across the room. It bounced off the wall, landing at the feet of the board members. Grant stepped forward. "Miss Halbrook, you are under investigation. If you continue obstructing, I will detain you." Karen froze. A thin, bitter laugh escaped her. "Detain me? You're going to detain me? Over him? Over some old papers and a strip of dirt?" Grant remained stone-faced. "Over violations you committed knowingly." Karen's face turned ghost white. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Then louder. "I did this for Ridgewood, for the community. They needed leadership. They needed." She stopped mid-sentence. Because the clubhouse doors opened, and all the residents outside, whether intentionally or accidentally, were staring in. They had heard everything. Dozens of them. Men, women, kids on bikes, elderly neighbors walking dogs, all witnessing their HOA president unravel in real time. Karen's voice went small, trembling. "Everyone," she gasped. I did this for you. I did this to protect your homes." But the looks on their faces told her what she didn't want to know. They weren't grateful. They weren't inspired. They weren't even angry. They were done. Completely done with her. Frank stepped forward first. His voice was calm but strong. "Karen, you're a menace." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Another voice called out, "We want to vote." A woman near the front shouted, "Remove her." Karen stumbled backward, shaking her head. "No, no, you can't do this. I am the HOA." Patricia stepped past her, lifted her chin, and faced the crowd. "I call for an emergency vote," she said clearly, "to remove Karen Halbrook from the HOA presidency, effective immediately." The crowd erupted in agreement. Hands shot into the air, dozens, maybe every single resident except Karen. Patricia counted slowly, and when she reached the final tally, she turned to Karen. "The vote is unanimous." Karen's mouth fell open. Her knees buckled, and the final blow came when Patricia added, voice cracking only slightly, "You are officially removed." Outside, the residents cheered. Inside, Karen gasped like she'd been stabbed with the truth. Officer Grant stepped forward. "Miss Halbrook, you'll need to come with me for further questioning." Karen let out a strangled sob. "This isn't happening," she whispered. This can't." But it was, because the reign of HOA Karen was officially over. And justice? Justice was just getting started. Karen didn't go quietly. Even after Officer Grant informed her she was removed, even after the residents voted unanimously, even after Patricia stepped forward to assume interim leadership, Karen still clung to her clipboard like it was a life preserver in a sinking ship. "I am not leaving," she shrieked. "This is my community." Grant remained calm. "Ma'am, you can either walk with me or be escorted. Those are your only options." Her voice cracked as she backed away. "None of you appreciate what I've done. I kept this place perfect. I enforced the rules. I protected property values." The crowd murmured. Someone muttered, "Protected? She fined us for having pumpkins on our porch." Another said, "She charged me $200 because my dog barked once." Derek added, "She tried to repossess my grill." Voices rose, each one revealing more of the dictator behind the HOA title. It wasn't anger anymore. It was relief, like everyone finally exhaled after being suffocated by Karen for years. Grant gestured toward the door. "Let's go." Karen trembled, but when he gently took her arm, she erupted again. "Don't touch me! This is a conspiracy, a persecution." She pointed wildly at me. He did this. He manipulated you all. Frank crossed his arms. Lady, you manipulated yourself. The neighbors laughed not cruelly, just exhausted, tired of being bullied, tired of being threatened, tired of Karen. As Grant led her outside, she kept shouting at the crowd, but her words were starting to sound small, weak, powerless. Once she was out of sight, Grant returned to me. We're not done, he said quietly. But this is a good start. I nodded. What now? Now, he said, we file everything officially. Inside the clubhouse, the remaining HOA board members looked shell-shocked. Papers were scattered on the conference table like debris after a storm hit. Patricia approached with careful steps. Mr. Thompson, she said softly, on behalf of the board, we're sorry. It wasn't your fault, I replied. She lied to all of you. Patricia shook her head, but we enabled her. We allowed her to bully people. You were just the first one who stood your ground. That hit me harder than I expected. We want to make things right, she continued. If you're willing, could we meet tomorrow to review your evidence? We want to clear every false fine she issued. I nodded, of course. But they had no idea just how deep this went. Once I left Ridgewood, I followed Officer Grant back to the county office. He ushered me into an interview room, took statements, scanned every document I brought, and added them to an official case file. Then he leaned forward, fingers interlaced. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to be honest with you, he said. This isn't a simple HOA dispute. What Karen did is serious. Very serious. I figured, I said. He nodded gravely. We're looking at multiple charges: falsifying public documents, attempted land seizure, fraudulent summons, trespassing, misuse of authority, coercion. He sighed. Depending on how the investigation shakes out, maybe even conspiracy. The room felt strangely quiet. Grant studied me. Are you willing to testify if it comes to that? Yes, I said without hesitation. He smiled faintly. Good, because I think your testimony might be the thing that finally shuts this down for good. I left the office feeling heavier but also oddly lighter. Heavy because of the mess Karen created, light because it was finally unraveling. On my drive home, I passed Ridgewood again. Residents were gathered in small clusters, talking quietly. Patricia waved when she saw my truck. Frank gave me a thumbs up. Mia smiled. It felt peaceful. But peace didn't last long. When I got home, Henry sat in a lawn chair on my porch, sipping iced tea like he owned the place. Well, he asked, how'd it go? I sat beside him and told him everything. The vote, the meltdown, the charges, the county investigation. Henry smiled that old man's smile that said he'd seen enough chaos in life to appreciate a good takedown. Your granddad would be proud, he said. We talked until sunset, then he stood and stretched. One more thing, he added, walking toward his truck. Found something else in those old records you gave me. My eyebrows lifted. More? Oh yeah, you're gonna like this. He handed me a thin envelope sealed with brittle tape. Came from the original developer of this area. Your granddad bought the land before the HOA ever existed, so the developer sent him a packet to explain planned zoning. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and a few maps. One caught my attention instantly. A small note scribbled at the bottom. Future HOA land plans terminate at the ridge line. All territory beyond that is protected private property, not to be touched, annexed, or built upon. It was dated 1978, 4 years before Ridgewood even broke ground. Well, I'll be damned, I whispered. This proves the HOA can't legally expand beyond their own boundary. Ever, Henry grinned. Exactly. Karen trying to annex your land wasn't just illegal, it was physically impossible. The HOA wasn't authorized to expand beyond their original plot. Suddenly, the final twist hit me. Karen hadn't just tried to take my land, she tried to expand the HOA in a direction where it was forbidden to grow. She tried to annex the one property the developer legally designated as untouchable. I laughed. Not a little laugh, a real, deep, cathartic laugh. Henry chuckled too, hoisted by her own petard. The next morning, Patricia called me again. Can you come to the clubhouse? She asked. We want you to see something. I drove over. Ridgewood residents were gathered again, only this time the atmosphere was warm, relieved. On a table inside the clubhouse sat a mountain of papers. Karen's violation notices, fines, threats, warnings all stacked in messy piles. Patricia stepped forward. Every false citation she issued, every bogus fine, every threat, they're all being canceled. Mia smiled warmly. We're dropping everything. Frank added, we're also voting to rewrite the bylaws. No more unilateral decisions, no more retroactive annexations, no more fake legal nonsense. Derek raised a hand, and we're sending a formal apology, signed by the board. Then Patricia handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. I frowned. What's this? For damages, she said. Karen used HOA funds to file fraudulent paperwork against you. We're returning every dollar. I opened my mouth to argue, but Patricia shook her head. You saved this neighborhood, she said softly. Let us repay the debt. As I walked out of the clubhouse with the check, I paused and looked back toward the ridge, the sheds sitting on my easement, the walking path they illegally built. The fence Karen insisted was community property. All of it now belonged to me in a way Karen had never expected. And the HOA? They were already preparing to dismantle every structure encroaching on my land. But the real satisfaction came a week later, when county authorities confirmed the official charges against Karen: fraud, forgery, trespassing, issuing false legal documents, attempted land seizure, and obstruction. She would face court, possibly jail. Her HOA empire had collapsed, and the land she tried so desperately to take, it remained exactly where it had always belonged. With me, looking back on everything that happened, I realized Karen never really wanted my land. She wanted control. The land grab, the fake notices, the bullying, the lies. It was all about power. And when people like her lose that power, the truth finally comes out. In the end, it wasn't the deed, the easement, or even the county officer that stopped her. It was something much simpler: standing your ground when someone tries to take what's yours. If there's one lesson I learned, it's this: protect your peace, your home, and your boundaries, because no one else will do it for you. And don't let anyone, no matter how loud or entitled, convince you that you don't deserve what's rightfully yours. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a crazy neighbor or an out-of-control HOA? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you enjoy wild HOA dramas like this, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss the next showdown.